Hello, this is Chris with Flip,
It's
and
true.
we tell truth sometimes.
I don't know
These
why it sticks in my mind so much. It's just a throwaway line from an Aqua Teen Hunger Force
really,
where
I've
where
been
one
watching
character goes,
that.
"It's true," and for some reason, I don't even remember what the reference is, but he just goes, "It's true."
I've been watching that lately. I'm
It's
almost
so
through the
good.
first season. Yeah, but
It
the
is
problem
such a
is
great show.
I don't know if it matters or not, but every once in a while, I think they're kind of made for that. But I stopped paying attention for a little bit, and I wonder if I should I back up and rewatch it, or should I just keep going?
There's almost no, like, serial to them. There's a little bit where they will reference things, but, like, it doesn't matter. It's I mean, that's what's one of those things about that show that fascinates me so much is that like, it's so unstructured, or at least it seems to be, but, like, I can tell the writers are some kind of brilliant. There is some kind of bones to every story, but it's so hard to find it through all the weirdness.
Yeah,
So, Cybernetic Ghost of Christmas Past, have you run into that character
I
yet?
think I did. Yeah,
Thousands
looks like a
of
duck.
years ago.
Yeah. And then he just keeps telling the story, and the story just keeps going and going.
You might wanna go to the bathroom. It's long.
And, you can just keep telling me the story. No, we'll wait.
Thousands of yeah, alright. People should just watch that
Yeah.
show. It's a lot better than Cara Santa Maria episode of
Well,
Mormon
so
Stories.
we're gonna first follow up our very last one we did with Cara
Oh, yeah.
leaving
Cara with an H.
Cara with an H, which I think is kind of
Oh, it's
funny
this guy.
because we know Cara Santa Maria came in to fill in for the nutty woke Rebecca Watson on Skeptic Guide for the Universe as soon as she left that. And now Kara's Cara Santa Maria is the replacement for Cara, the Mormon Stories Cara. Cara Santa Maria is the cleanup. She's the cleanup wokester.
She's the fixer.
She's the replacement wokester. This is Mike
What
Norton,
line?
new name Noah. He put together a whole entire video. I'll put it in the clips, but you and I were talking last time. We were wondering what had happened on the Rodney Meldrum episode because we hadn't watched the whole thing. And this guy put it all together in one long clip that he called
Mm.
NuanceHoe Has a Meltdown, Gets Fired from Mormon Stories. Did you not watch any of this? I sent it to you, but you might not.
No, I think I missed this one.
So he was the main one of why they did that whole entire stream about, oh, we don't like all these people giving us criticism. And then I saw him post this on Ex Mormon, and the thread had something like 500 comments on it. And all these people, half of them were coming after Mike Norton for being mean to her. I'd say he is a bit harsh in his stories,
Yeah, no,
especially how he
I
gets
said
on.
before, I'm not a fan of Mike Norton, you know? I think he's attention seeking and an axe grinder, and he's a lot of things I don't like, but I think he's right
He's
about
not,
some things,
he's not
you
wrong
know?
all the time.
Yeah, like, he's kind of an Alex Jones type where it's like some of the craziest shit he says turns out to be kinda true.
Yeah. So I'll put this in the show notes, but this is just a highlight reel of she did get kind of meltdowny. And it was we were exactly right. Everything that we assumed, because I'd watched a couple hours of that episode, but everything we assumed was correct, that she just couldn't get off of needing to make him go through a struggle session and admit that his beliefs are bad before they could move on to anything.
Fun?
I'm trying to find the moment where it really fell down with I actually heard it's the moment that made it end with, Delenn and Cara. I'm gonna show it to you.
See, I have to be careful because if I pick up my cat and toss her behind my shoulders, we'll get canceled like that girl who was live streaming and she
What's
tossed her cat,
what's Kitty's name again?
Bucket.
Bucket?
I don't have a reason for that.
It's not after Keeping Up Appearances?
No, I think what it is, like, because I just started calling her that, but if it's related to anything, it's because like, when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, when people say like, "Oh, what do you want for your birthday?" My joke answer, you know, "What do you want for Christmas? What do you want for your birthday?" And my joke answers was like, "I just wanna lay on the floor while someone pours a 5-gallon bucket of kittens on me." And I thought that was funny. But I think that's the only reason that I call her Bucket. That and it's just worked out. It's a good name. People respond to it well.
Whose evidence is of an event that didn't happen.
It's
Like you're
leading.
saying,
It
John Dehlin, did you hire a female co-host so that you could talk over her? No, you didn't. Listen, love you so much. So,
Oh my
no, I'm trying to say is like,
So it's that
See, I wish like I've been avoiding like because I even think like, okay, if I put it on 1.5 speed, I can grind through all of this in a weekend. You know, but I just don't want to do it because it's like I don't know. Part of it is like these are discussions that I was into 15 years ago, and like nothing's advanced.
Mhm.
But this, like, already just this 5 seconds, like, oh, I didn't know this was going on.
She said that to Delynn when Delynn tried to cut in to say, let's talk about other stuff, because she was trying to drive home with Meldrum that he needed to admit that his stuff was sexist, racist, bigot, Istophobic until they could continue on.
Yeah.
And that moment made it so John had to shut up and sit there and let her sit there doing it to him for another 40 minutes. And
Yeah,
that's really what you
Kelly
get
would
right
send out
there.
another tweet.
Mormon supports it. Or
And
they
it's just 40 minutes of her rewording her position of trying to get Meldrum to admit that he's a baddie with bad thoughts.
are becoming more dogmatic. They're
Well,
more
that-
hateful towards gay people now because they think that that's what the God wants them to do.
Look.
But your evidence is making families be torn apart.
I just randomly clicked on that.
Your evidence is making families be torn apart.
I
I
just
mean, I get
randomly-
she's speaking it extemporaneously, but that sentence is just silliness.
that was a complete random click too.
Because they were not of the right gender. Again, I look at
random
it.
clicking the thing, and it goes for 40 minutes, and that's why they could not advance further. And you hear a couple times John will try to cut in and say, "I think we should move on. I think we should move on," and they can't. They can't really do it because she started out with that thing saying, "How dare you talk over a woman?" So that's where
All because the Mormon guy believes that the Book of Mormon A happened and B happened in Michigan or whatever.
yeah, not
See, that's the part
Right,
that's
yeah.
part of where I'm trying to figure out, like, was there something other than he's a Mormon? Other than that, is there anything about him particularly
no,
about race or gender or nothing?
no.
It's
It's just he's just a Mormon, and he just thinks it happened more in the Americas, and that's extra racist because that's more proof of being nationalistic for the United States is a good thing for these, I don't know, whatever they pump up their mind as these Trump supporting, jingoistic super American people. And then secondly, they think it realigns itself back with people who talk about the mound diggers. There was people,
builders.
there was people in time around Joseph Smith or before Joseph Smith who had assumed those mound diggers or those mounds must have been created by a European civilization. It wasn't even.
Yeah.
And so they realign it with that and saying that's doubling down on those ideas, which are super double racist, triple racist. So
And that's a
the-
Mormon thing specifically.
No, that there was actually
No, that's obviously not. No, that's
Oh,
no, that's what I'm getting at. It's like this whole thing where it's like, because again, like, of all the things that Mormonism gets wrong, why is it gay first and then race second thing that matters so much to the Carahs, to this Cara?
because
And
it's the
obviously it's
shut down-
because her religion is queer theory. She's
it's the shut-
she's the church of people who have empathy about.
it's also the
gayness.
thought stopping cliche. It's that you can't even get your ideas out or think or talk because it harms. It causes harm. It causes harm.
That's our-
This is kind of funny. I think it was a bit surprising to find this out that we were praising Kyle Dunnigan on the last episode, and on the last episode we were also talking about how we don't think Kara's a comedian at all. And it turns out her husband was on a podcast.
And is also not funny.
These three main comedians, Tig Notaro.
I watched a little bit of this, but I couldn't get through it all just because it's just, again, it's boring. It's too much of the same old acts. It's church. It's just church.
Yeah, did you hear that though? Did you hear who's on that
Three
podcast?
main comedians, Tig Notaro.
Yeah, he worked for Tig Notaro.
Yeah, all very hilarious.
Kyle Dunnigan is on the podcast. He said,
Oh, he was on
So
with
that
the
was
show.
the
"Listen, yeah,
I missed that part that it was with
listen,
Kyle
I played
Dunnigan.
it a couple times."
premise of the podcast is that it's these three main comedians, Tig Notaro, David Huntsberger, and Kyle Dunnigan, all very hilarious. That Eric,
So
Wow.
yeah, so her husband was on a podcast with the guy that we were praising, but it turns out they put a monologue to do comedy around him talking about being a Mormon. He wasn't a comedian. He was her personal assistant. He was only
Yeah.
over there working as a personal assistant. And she says throughout the thing that she was working as a nanny. So it still wasn't like they were working as comedians. I mean, maybe they could get comedian spots with these guys, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if you had those sorts of ties and you wanted to call yourself a comedian, I think you'd be able to, getting something,
That's an in.
networking going on there.
Working
Although-
for Tig Notaro.
What we know about Kyle Dunnigan these days and what we know about her comedy, I am sure, Kyle Dunnigan's not raring to get her on the podcast.
I want Kyle Dunnigan to do a Mormon character based on him now.
Yeah, no
and
doubt.
add it to the show. He and Wendell can fight.
It's ironic too. That's pretty.
I didn't even catch that because, like, I kind of put this on, was like, oh, let's see what they have to say, and it's like, yeah, they're just. I mean,
So
mostly it's just, oh, it's not funny.
Tig Notaro, I am not a big fan of. I never thought she was that funny, but I think she also did some stuff like she has a career because Louis C.K. put her over, and then she threw Louis C.K. under the bus as any good ladder climber will do as soon as Louis C.K. was in trouble. But I remember Norm Macdonald was pretty critical of her too for turning her cancer battle into. Listen to Norm
Yeah.
Macdonald's talk about her album of the year being this big sad cancer thing. And so later you have people like, oh, who's the one on Netflix? Hannah Gadsby
Oh,
on Netflix. It was like that was like a derivative of Tig Notaro starting the thing of I'm going to do a comedy special that's actually more serious and devastating than funny, but I'll say a couple of funny quips here and there, but it's really kind of more like an NPR woe is me hour. And then she won comedy album of the year. And from the start of it, Norm Macdonald was critical of that, saying, that's not comedy. And really the Hannah Gatsby stuff is really like born out of that stuff.
and Norm Macdonald was saying this while he had a bowel cancer diagnosis that he was
nobody
keeping
knew
secret,
about.
and telling genuinely funny bowel cancer jokes, really, really top notch. His whole alcoholism is a disease.
Yeah, I think that just shows the integrity of Norm and the non-integrity of Tig Notaro. I don't think it's wrong to talk about your cancer or whatever. I think it was wrong the way she threw her guy under the bus so hard.
Like, even by the allegations, what Louis C.K. did was just creep, and that's it.
Yeah,
Like even if we take the allegations as 100% accurate from their perspective, all he did was be a creep. There
all
was
he
no
did was be a
sexual
creep.
assault. There
It was
was
an
he asked for consent, like all the but like obviously the whole thing was built around the idea that Louis C.K. was the Harvey Weinstein of stand-up, which is just laughable in not the funny way.
and there's another level of it that they tried to paint it like he was an all-powerful Harvey Weinstein or the boss of those
Yeah.
people.
No,
And
exactly.
all
Like
the
the idea that
claims
he was anybody's ticket into the comedy world, where it's like,
and
no,
that's such
that's not how that
concept
works.
creep. It's such concept creep because Harvey Weinstein really was interviewing people for real jobs. There might have been moments where Louis C.K. could have been in that position once he was the showrunner and once he was a producer in Hollywood, but all of the claims about C.K. were before he even got internet
Yeah.
famous.
He was just
And
a working comic.
he was a working comic like the rest of them, and that whole construal to try to say it was power, as they are always construing it, was
Yeah.
bull crap. One last little thing, but this is the week of did you see this? H3 got canceled.
So I followed this a little bit because part of the problem is like I never watched the show regularly. I mean, I never watched it. I only
watched
ever
it
saw
though.
clips of it. So I barely know what the guy is, but like I've been following the headlines and the gossip. But so he's just been canceled by the cancel mob.
Yeah, so he had a short video essay or more kind of skit channel for years that people really liked. I liked it. I saw a bunch of those skits back in the day. Then he became the internet's hero for two different things because he was the guy who stood up to the lawsuits about fair use.
Oh, that's right. He won the big fair use case.
And
Set a
then
precedent, right? That was a
yeah.
that was a precedent-setting YouTube case.
Then do you remember that humongous thing?
Yeah, good old Humongous.
He stood up for the
One
humongous
of the
guy.
greatest trolls of all time.
Yeah. So this guy was this woman they were at some court or something, and she came up to him and asked him what his name was. Yeah, and she goes, "What's the last name?" He
Yeah.
goes, "Humongous." And she goes, "Humongous what? Humongous what?" And she just tries to make this whole internet scene, and that's like some sort of sexual harassment thing.
She
And
started
he thought,
yelling. She started yelling in public, "This guy is sexually harassing me. This guy is sexually harassing me." And the thing is, and what the guy had done is that he had spoken in favor of police. This was
yeah,
like in Seattle, and he went like into a public hearing and did a citizen thing and said, "I think police are a good thing." And so yeah, this woke lady
wanted
accosted him in the hall, and he just said, "My name is Hugh,
to
last
get
name
him
Mungus,"
canceled. Yeah.
and
So
tried to get him arrested for a sexual assault by screaming in a lobby.
So Ethan stood up for him and brought him on the podcast, made him kind of a big name. They even got like some GoFundMe thing for him or something like that. Then he was one of the first persons to have Jordan Peterson on. And then just 3 months ago, he suddenly starts making podcast with Hassan Piker, and then they make like a once a week podcast. And then once he starts doing that, he decides to take down his Jordan Peterson video and he announces that I can't be associated with this guy because the stuff he says is, problematic or all that sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
And it was just 3 months ago, and Peterson gave him the warning. V's got the warning here.
I remember the warning. He's like, he ends up with like, I like you. Like,
Yeah.
you need to stop this because it's
He
going to
says,
hurt you.
You're going to get canceled.
Yeah.
Sorry, Gary Stans. Today we have no sponsors because I am an existential threat to gay rights and all progress. So, of course, our wonderful fans
There are,
to
buddy.
get rid of our sponsors and to have them not sponsor or not to support us. So we are, I'm very, I'll just say this. I'm very thankful to our members. It makes this show kind of bulletproof to stuff like this, even though it's painful and emotionally, it's just painful that, people would do that. There it is. And, the other thing is like, you expect a little more of the sponsors in a way, but I get it. It's just transactional for them. But, I feel like I put so much into our good partners, and it's kind of crazy when they just drop you like a bag of dirt went over some bullshit. But
Oh yeah, what's it like to drop someone like a bag of dirt?
It's
Ethan?
weird. It's upsetting.
Isn't it a weird feeling to be on the person dropping someone like a bag of dirt because you're afraid that your association with them and the things they say might threaten your personal well-being? God, what would that be like? And see, like, if only, like, if he learns the lesson from us, then God bless him. Because, like, right there, like, you can see in his face, the guy hasn't slept. He's obviously going through a real crisis, and that sucks. But if he learns his lesson, then I'm like 100% on his side. But if he just grinds on, if he doesn't say, you know what, like, that was a mistake, I shouldn't cancel people. It's wrong to cancel people. I know I've been canceled. But
Yeah,
we'll see what happens.
he had a whole thing where he blamed a suicide on Keemstar, and then he went to Keemstar's sponsors and asked them, "Are you sponsoring this guy?" And then people said that that's going to be kind of like an Adpocalypse 2.0 if you do this. And they got on him for that, and now here he is canceled. I mean, there's a lot.
Yeah, no, it's like the nuclear option.
Yeah,
It's when you go after someone's livelihood. It's just it's evil.
yeah.
And also, by the way, it's how the Nazis began the whole Jewish thing. They just started out by saying, "Oh, you can't have things like bank accounts." Justin Trudeau.
It's how they started in Russia too. I mean, that stuff started long before the Russian Revolution. They do stuff like kind of like Antifa type.
You're not allowed
businesses
to buy food at the market where all the food is. We're not saying that we want you to starve to death. We're just saying you can't buy food.
Yeah. So Peterson, I mean, I'll just read it because V reads it here, and V's voice. But he says, "What are you up to?"
How do you do the Kermit? I don't know how to do a Jordan Peterson voice.
What are you up to? What are you up to?
That's pretty good.
We had a good conversation. Like, I enjoyed meeting you and talking with you. What if it said precisely that motivated your actions and your accusations?
Women should be forced into monogamous relationships.
Why are you not forcing your wife into a monogamous relationship? An honest question. Finally, you might seriously consider providing. I'm not going to say your pronouns. I'm not going to do it. Consider providing me with the footage so I can post it, given that I agreed to appear on your show. Also, I'd like to warn you that those who engage in cancel culture generally live to regret it. I'm not going to come after you, except politely, in this Twitter stream, but the chickens will definitely come home to roost. You will be held to higher and higher, and soon impossible to maintain ethical standards by the very mob you currently wish to please.
I imagine that even Jordan Peterson thought that this was like going to be like a 12 to 24 month.
It's kind of why it
taking like 5 weeks.
Because the same thing with Cara, like we thought it was 12 to 24 months, then it happened.
Yeah, no, we're done. Accelerate the contradictions.
Everything's happening at light speed nowadays, as early as us.
Yeah.
You will make a mistake, they will devour you with glee. Please take this warning seriously. I liked you.
Probably like the best career move Ethan could make would be to invite Jordan Peterson onto a show for an hour-long special where they talk about this.
Well, he's not currently making any more videos with Hassan. We don't know if that's because, Hassan's too cool for him right now or not, but maybe they're going to get back together. But there's no way Hassan would keep going with him if he got back with Jordan. But from the start, Tim Pool said that he thought the whole thing was just Ethan just going to wherever the money was, and that's all he ever did.
Yeah, that's part of my issue with like why I never got into Ethan Klein is that the guy's kind of a blank slate. Like he just
Well, the
like
podcast,
he had a little like yeah, that's the thing is like every time I saw it, like
he's dumb.
it
He
wasn't
doesn't really know
funny.
what
Yeah,
he's doing. His
like
skits were funny. His 4 or 5 minute skits about doing weed and doing weird stuff were funny.
see, I didn't know he did skits. I thought that he was like just an incredibly boring Howard Stern type.
No, the podcast,
Boringer, because like Howard Stern bores me, but like I understand his appeal.
everybody got pissed because he started doing the podcast because they thought it was just a money grab because he saw that the people doing podcasts were making more money doing all these sponsors, and it was easier, quicker material than sitting there and trying to come up with skits all the different time. Or he kind of did some content cop type stuff where that's where he got sued by that one guy because he'd find guys cringy channels about picking up girls and he'd show their videos, and that's how he got sued because
Oh.
he was like, look at this cringy guy's channel, and then the guy
And
sued
they
him.
said, "Oh, copyright violation," but that's fair use.
Yep.
And then, but now we're going after Orthodox Jewish TikTok libs of TikTok lady.
Yeah.
That stuff is pretty scary.
Oh yeah.
Where that lady showed up
Washington Post.
at Washington Post reporter shows up at a relative's house. Like
Mhm.
this is supposed to be serious journalism. That's creepy.
I mean,
stuff.
everybody's probably seen it. And the lady is a complete hypocrite because she was just crying just a couple weeks ago about herself getting doxxed in some way, shape, or form. Saying, no, I shouldn't have to go through this.
That's the whole thing is like, and like everybody has pointed out that like libs of TikTok, literally all she does is take videos posted by liberals themselves on their public social networking platforms, and then she juxtaposes the stupid things they say against themselves. That's it. Like, and like, remember when Jon Stewart and The Daily Show used to do that to Republicans and we all laughed? But it turns out that that woman deserves to be doxxed by the fucking Washington Post. That's insane. That's terrifying.
They've actually been doing stuff like that for years. Remember that guy who put up
Oh, yeah.
the meme about
Andy No.
dog-
A random Asian got assaulted in New Orleans while Andy No was in England.
Yeah, there's
And
that.
the guy bragged about it. It's like, I just punched Andy No in a bar in New Orleans, and Andy No replies like, I'm in America.
They'll claim Andy No doxes Antifa people, which, because you don't want John Larson to find out Antifa people actually exist in their
Yeah, they're not
organizers.
real.
But
They're not being sentenced to prison right now for their Antifa related activities.
But Andy was just doing reporting that reporters would always do. These people get arrested. When they get arrested, their arrest records are put on there. What they were doing was
Yeah.
throwing
Oh, and-
firebombs at a courthouse for 100 days.
Yeah, people would be in the street throwing firebombs at a courthouse. Andy No would videotape them doing this, and the left says, "Oh, he's doxing these peaceful protesters." 93% peaceful.
Well, after they'd get arrested, some of them he'd post who got arrested or that this person's been arrested in this city, this city, this city. So you see that they've been traveling around to do the Molotov cocktails and all that sorts of stuff.
Would you
But-
say that kind of a sorry, it's a tangent, but would you say that your Jack Russell Terriers were at least 93% peaceful?
Those are the ones that don't count, man. They're like 50%. They were more Antifa.
Yeah, they were not 93. They didn't even reach that level.
If I had kids and the kids were my 2 Jack Russells, I'd be on this podcast complaining about my Antifa kids. That's what I couldn't get them to behave. Maybe that's why it's good I don't have kids. No.
That Molotov cocktail is only 93% full of
Yeah.
flammable liquid.
Oh, I still
Sorry,
get
anyway.
sad. I still get sad when I remember They Might Be Giants made a post about, look, it's science. It's 93% peaceful.
Did they do that? I just
They Might Be Giants put something up right after some like fact checked article came out saying we did the research and they're 93% peaceful.
I got thrown out of a They Might Be Giants fan group, and I've been a fan of They Might Be Giants since 1989.
I know.
I've seen them close to 20 times, and I got thrown out of the fan group because somebody posted like, "What songs by They Might Be Giants do you think best tell the story of toxic masculinity?" And I was like, "This is stupid." And it started a flame war, and then
Don't
I
need a
got
train.
thrown
The
out.
opposite, I would say.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's just like you're really gonna ruin They Might Be Giants for me. You know, because
Yeah.
like talking about They'll Need a Crane. When I was a kid, I thought, oh, this is a funny song. And then I listened to it. I was driving in the car, like, 3 months into my divorce. That song came on and I had to pull over because I'm crying. I'm like, oh, that's now I understand.
Well,
Um,
that's kind of funny because, like, I bet you they'll do something like, say, the song "Lost My Lucky Ball and Chain" was actually talking from the point of a person who's toxically masculine, like the Beastie Boys. The
oh
Beastie
yeah.
Boys had a documentary just this last summer, and they said, when we did "Fight for Your Right to Party" and "Girls," those were pretending they were literary, pretending to talk from the place of a douchebag. We weren't the douchebags. We were doing listen the whole
Like,
thing like, "Shut up. You were
yeah.
not doing that." It's kinda the same thing Jay-Z came and talked about. "No, when I was talking about 99 Problems and the bitch ain't one, I was talking about the dog. That's what we were talking about, the police dog, the smelling dog that would come and say stuff."
That's what a shitty person would think. But
And
I was,
yeah, in each one of
yeah.
those cases, you're like, "No, it's art, and you guys know that you meant the thing that you meant, and now you're just trying to not get Ethan canceled, like the way that."
Yeah, like that's things like I can believe that the Beastie Boys aren't didn't just wake up every morning dripping with misogyny. But like, no, that song, like,
But
yeah,
you
it
you
was a joke, but
you
it's
thought it was
yeah,
funny to sing about girls doing that stuff.
exact. It
So,
wasn't it wasn't the roots. It
yeah,
wasn't the documentary roots of pro female feminist rap.
yeah. So we brought it up before. Elevatorgate
Oh my gosh.
comes up in here in the Cara Santa Maria episode of Mormon Stories. We'll go over it again.
We've brought up the term New Atheism a good few times. So for those who might not know, tell us a little bit about New Atheism. And you've mentioned the death of New Atheism, and you seem like you've defined it around this particular point. And I kind of always saw it as like a gradual die off, and you kind of identified this point. So maybe talk a little bit about what New Atheist is and how it.
It's pretty wild to me to find out, like, how many people who weren't around at this time don't even realize that this all happened, you know?
Yeah, it is so weird. Like, that is the thing I'm always running into all the time is like, I mean, it's like we talk about the world started yesterday to so many of these people. And it's just like, yeah, there was 10 years of new atheism that you and I lived through, and like, and
Overnight.
nobody knows about any of it.
Overnight, it just got
Yeah.
shellacked. And that James Lindsay said it before, and I agree with it, is these things like Jordan Peterson predicting or us predicting that Carah will blow up or that Ethan will get canceled. You seem like sages. You seem like you're prophets or something like that. And
How'd you
you're like, no,
guess?
we lived through it. We've seen it. I've watched it happen. You know, I watched it go from a mustard seed into a bigger thing, but I've seen it
Yeah.
happen in my university classes. I've seen it happen. We watched it happen in the atheism scene. We watched it happen in the gamer scene. We
We
watched it
watched it
happen in the
happen to
conference.
Sunstone.
We watched it happen to Sunstone. We watched it happen to most of the ex-Mormon podcasts. We're not sages. It's just the cycle.
Can be for maybe those who don't know.
Sure.
And then what was it that you saw as the death specifically that really kind of cut it off?
So New Atheism was a phenomenon in Western politics for the most part, and also swept across the world. There was organized atheism always existed, but then a few years in, especially post 9/11, there were four big authors that came into it. There was Sam Harris, there was the late Christopher Hitchens, there was Richard Dawkins, who's arguably the most famous atheist in the world, and there's Daniel Dennett. They produced 4 books that swept the West.
They get mentioned in the Cara Santa Maria episode.
Yeah, and that's because I remember the way she talks about Dawkins, and I'm like,
We'll get
what,
to it.
what does she know that I don't know? I'm
It's
curious.
Elevatorgate. She's talking about Elevatorgate.
Is that
Yeah.
really it?
Elevatorgate is everybody was mad at Dawkins because Dawkins said, "Oh, calm down," you know.
Yeah.
But let's keep going.
I think all of them were New York Times bestsellers. It made atheism become more mainstream in the West. And so all these different organizations, 501c3 nonprofits like American Atheists, the Freedom from Religion Foundation, the Secular Student Alliance, Foundation Beyond Belief, numerous others, they ended up getting millions upon millions of dollars in funding thanks to the efforts of these 4 gentlemen. And numerous other intellectuals have popped up as well. It was a very interesting time. And there was a journalist in 2006 who called this phenomenon the New Atheism. And I wish this phenomenon continued even into 2021, but it died out. I think a little early in its infancy. So New Atheism was really at its prime in the 2000s.
It was completely in its infancy, and it was seeming to be the thing that was going to be good.
But
I mean,
speaking extemporaneously, but early in its infancy, like that just bothers me. It's like it means the same thing.
oh,
Early and in its
that's
infancy.
it's a what's the word?
Tautology.
Tautology or a
Well, you know the one that I hate more than any other, and I hear everywhere, like from top to bottom, from journalists and PhDs and everything, is multiple different. There are multiple different facets to this. Like, no, multiple and different are synonyms. They mean the same thing.
Yeah.
No, not multiple different, various different. Sorry, multiple different is the thing that actual Justice Warrior says all the time. I'm getting them mixed up in my head. Various different. That's the one that drives me nuts. Is
Various
various different.
different. It's like
There are various
unique.
different tax policies. Like, no,
It's a
various and
redundant.
different mean the same thing.
It's a redundancy. It's
Yeah.
a unique new. It's
If
that's
you have some
unique,
objects that are variant, then they are different.
unique new is one of like this is a
Oh, yeah.
unique new thing. That's
Unique new thing.
that's
Yeah, no, that's
redundant.
another one. Anyway, early in its infancy.
Yeah.
was going into even the early 2010s. We were getting millions upon millions of dollars. We were setting up meetup groups in local towns across the country. We were helping out ex-Muslims around the world, helping students form chapters at high school and college campuses.
One of the craziest things to me has been Ayan Hersey Ali going from like the hero of the atheism scene to being persona non grata.
She's lumped in with conservatives now.
Yeah.
It was really cool to be an atheist.
I remember the time I said I brought her up, specifically her, to Lindsay Hansen Park, and she just goes, "She's just a Prager youth, dude." I'm like, that's what you know about Ayan Hersey.
That's what you know about Ayana. She's a Prager youth dude. Yeah, in Somalia, there's a lot of Prager indoctrination going down.
At this time. And we were having these amazing conferences in the US, conferences in Canada, conferences in the UK. Well, there was also a conference that happened in 2011 in Ireland, the World Atheist Conference. This happened a little over 10 years ago. And at this conference, there was Richard Dawkins and a few other big speakers, but there also happened to be this speaker named Rebecca Watson. Rebecca Watson runs a blog called Skeptics, and she also has a YouTube channel. She hung out with a lot of people at this World Atheist Conference. And usually when you're at an atheist conference, you usually stay up till 4 a.m. At the hotel bar. Everyone usually gathers there, and then when people get tired, they gradually move up to their rooms. Well, here comes 4 a.m., and Watson decides to go to her room. There's a gentleman that happens to follow her into the elevator. And while they were in the elevator, the gentleman kindly asked, this is apparently according to accounts that Watson actually made, would you like to come back to my room for a couple?
Yeah, nobody knows who the man is.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Everything we know about this story is from Rebecca Watson. And
The
her
man
own
might not
story-
exist.
Yeah.
He might not exist.
But even her own story, I mean, we'll hear it.
She says no.
She gets invited for coffee.
and
She
essentially that's quality.
declines, and she
That's it.
destroyed a movement.
Yeah, that's it.
And then later on, she leaves the elevator to go to her room. They both go to each other's rooms. I don't know if they talk again or whatever. Polite ask for sex, declined, whatever. It happened.
Not a direct ask for
Yeah.
sex, a direct an ask for coffee euphemism.
Yeah. If only Louis C.K. had asked them for coffee.
He'd be just as canceled. This is a power play.
Well, Watson later on blogged and then made a video and said that this is an example of sexism in the atheist movement.
She blogged, but she brought it up.
She came out.
I heard it was on the Skeptics guy.
Exactly. Yeah. She brought it up to I think she released like a little video, I think pretty soon afterward. And then I heard about it on the Skeptics Guide. And then I saw like the YouTube reacting to the video and the fallout, which we're getting to, because Richard Dawkins.
All Richard Dawkins did was say, "Oh, come on."
Yeah. Like it was an invitation. That's it. This
And-
isn't an example of the patriarchy putting down women in science.
And they went insane. They got especially mad that Dawkins didn't jump on board with it.
Oh boy.
Like
Yeah.
systemic sexism and misogyny everywhere. That if you go to an atheist conference, these evil men who like to request you for coffee in the room, that's the evidence of rape culture right there. I'm kind of exaggerating things a little bit, but
No, you're not. He's not exaggerating
movie.
things. That was what they were saying. He's walking himself back, but no, that was the reaction. They were
I
saying
think
that
what-
asking for somebody for coffee in an elevator is rape culture.
I think what he's exaggerating that you think that is true, that is not an exaggeration, is that the whole movement blew up right then.
Oh yeah.
The actual truth of it is there's probably a bunch of little more conferences and then slowly backing off and slowly doing stuff. And Peter Boghossian would even say that I started making sure my kids were with me at each conference and all that sorts of stuff. But
Yeah.
it was a trickle down, and then as we've said before, Thunderfoot, he started making videos of watching the trickle down. Like you can see
Yeah.
that
He documented the trickle down, and it was fast. It wasn't as fast as Ethan Klein getting canceled.
Yeah.
It was more of a 12 to 24 month thing from when the atheist conferences were bursting, they were selling out to where they were, barely attended.
10
And then
blue-haired people on the panel, no longer the 4 horsemen who brought in the millions. You couldn't get
Yeah.
big names at it anymore. They wouldn't go to it. And so then they'd have like these different nobodies on the panels, and then there'd be nobody in the crowds. And Thunderfoot had all the video of it.
And I mean, that's the other thing is like, it really is telling that for all of Rebecca Watson's career as a quote unquote atheist science published, what is it? What do they call themselves? What does Cara Mead talk to herself?
Communicator,
Yeah,
science,
science communicator. There you go.
something like that.
Her job as an atheist science communicator, for all of that, what we know her for is destroying new atheism. We know
Right.
her as the woman who blew up new atheism because she didn't like getting asked out in an elevator.
I don't know that
Do you remember her
followed
comment?
her since.
Like, has she? Yeah, exactly. But like, I don't know. It's just the irony of the whole thing, where it's like, frankly, her whole career was based on sexism. It was the sexism of men going, yeah, okay, well, come on, feminist, we'll give you your voice, but she never had an original thought, like she was fine on Skeptics Guide, like for the most part, except for like, because I did notice toward the end where I'm like, there seems to be like political axe grinding every time, like every
Yeah,
time she has a segment, it's
it all
got some kind
started
of
right
weird
there. It
gender
started. She
quirk to
kind
it.
of did it before, but then as soon as that moment hit, every single time it was far more bent that way. And then she was gone within months. And who knows if they asked her to leave or she decided or what. But
Because like, because Cara Santa Maria talks about how like, oh, it's the full spectrum, and she kind of, I don't remember exactly the language, but the way they talk about like, oh, those Trump types, where it's like, I mean, I haven't listened to Skeptics Guide. Honestly, I haven't listened in a few years. I used to listen to that show every week without fail, but I'm not sure exactly why I kind of dropped off. But like, I never got the impression that any of them were conservative by any means. Like, I think at most you might have some center left types in that group.
no, they definitely weren't. But I think how Kara comes off in this podcast that we're going to go over is
We're
how
almost an
Skeptics
hour.
Guide started seeming, even though she was the replacement for Rebecca Watson, because Rebecca Watson was off the charts woke at that point.
Yeah.
Cara Santa Maria wasn't much better, and she had. I'm gonna try to pull up the clip, but she had been on like Joe Rogan and all this stuff, and
Well, she dated Bill Maher at one point.
yeah, and so she was kind of going around, and I remember she was on the Nerd. What's that? Chris,
The Nerdist?
the Nerdist. You got it. Yep. And he got canceled. I mean,
Oh,
that's a
that's
whole
right.
other
Yeah.
story in its own. He got completely canceled by an ex-girlfriend, Johnny Depp style. And we're in the middle of the Johnny Depp trials right at this moment. But he pushed back and he talked back about it, but he had to sell off the whole entire Nerdist thing. But she'd always pop up on the Nerdist stuff. And even in those scenarios, like Cara and Rebecca, I don't think either one of them were PhDs and they got on that show. You and I could have commented as well on any sort of scientific thing not being PhDs, but every other guy on that show was for sure a PhD. That's the level you have to get at. But that brings up a whole other episode. You remember that guy at CERN who did a paper proving that men had to have bigger resumes to get onto things like that,
He got canceled for it.
and he got canceled. Yeah. And he proved it empirically.
Yeah, he proved empirically that, if anything, the science community is discriminating against men on the basis of their maleness.
Yeah. And all of that hiring for justice, the citation justice, that you have to have a certain amount of female citations in your paper now so that we can boost the female citations and all that stuff. That all.
There's so many of those things. There's the guy who was part of the team that landed the probe on the asteroid.
Oh yeah, and
he was wearing the comic book shirt that
yeah.
had comic book women on it, and they tried to destroy him for it. And then there was that old scientist who told a joke about women in the lab because they cry and fall in love with you, and he was talking about his wife that he met in the lab and fell in love with, and they fucking wrecked an old man's reputation over it. Just
he sometimes listens to us, but there was the guy who was the director of that Harry Potter video game got canceled too. There were so many of them; it's just impossible to even keep track of now. But
scary, it's like that's one of the things where I'm like, when I think like, I don't have anything in my life, I'm like, well, at least nobody can take it all away from me. Because that's the thing is like, you worry about like, oh, wouldn't it be nice to be Johnny Depp with $1 billion? Like, I wouldn't trade anything. No amount of money would make it worth being Johnny Depp right now. Not
there's that situation. There's the Will Smith situation. There's all this.
Oh yeah,
where stuff's coming out where you're like, it used to be these A-list actors. We were all supposed to be envious of their life, and now we're getting the point of like, no thanks. I don't.
I was reading about Sammy Davis Jr. And there were rumors because he dated white women. And like the story is, I can't remember, like some like Hollywood producer hired the mafia to physically threaten him and his family to stop dating white women.
Mm,
Like that's how Hollywood used to be, you
yeah.
know? And now, like, as I was just thinking about Aziz Ansari, that's another one of those things where it's like, so the only version of events that we have from the Aziz Ansari career ending date was the person making the complaint.
Yeah.
And if we take her at her word,
It was just a bad.
she 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 agreed to a bad sexual experience that I mean, not even a bad one. She just didn't have a great time, and
Yeah.
she wrecked a man's career over it.
Yeah.
Yeah, God, we could go on forever about these dumb stories. Gian Gomeshi, that was a fun one
Oh my god.
because I actually once read. I went through all the trouble and I read the judge's decision in that. And
Yeah.
it's funny because that's one of those things where that didn't touch the news, where the judge goes through all of the evidence. But because, it's the nature of the thing where it's like they're not on trial, but the accusers in that case, where she's like, basically, you guys lied, you colluded. Even after we told you to knock it off with the lying, you kept lying, you tried to fake evidence, all this stuff. But Gian Gomeshi is gone. His career it's over. He doesn't get to recover from it, even though he was entirely exonerated at trial.
There's
Did you ever watch the Trailer Park Boys?
I haven't watched it. I've been told that I need to get into watching it.
Oh, because the first few seasons, one of the characters' wives is played by the principal Gian Gomeshi accuser.
Nuh-uh.
Yeah, like her career is fine. Like it's funny because like
there's-
she was a part-time actor, but she's also a captain in the Canadian Air Force.
Mm.
I don't know.
Did you
Crazy
hear about
shit.
the Vic Mignogna stuff? He was
No,
a voiceover actor for really famous one for like Japanimation type stuff, anime.
oh yeah.
And he got canceled because at different conventions he would hug and kiss on the cheek. And he's completely canceled, like acting like he's the worst person in the world about it.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking about how like Cuba Gooding Jr. just
Yeah,
pled
dude.
guilty in court for kissing a waitress. And then, but like, we have Joe Biden on video kissing children. It's like, how the hell is this supposed to work? I don't think that Joe Biden should go to prison for kissing children. I don't think that Cuba Gooding Jr. like sexually assaulted a waitress. Like, I think that there's a middle ground here.
That
We
is
can tell, like,
fairly
Cuba Gooding Jr. and Joe Biden stop smelling people's hair, stop giving people kisses. I remember you told me a long time ago that like in your job as an HR guy, that like you're constantly fighting with your bosses and CEOs of just going, look, just don't hug people. I know you're full of nothing but kindness and you've never had a sexual thought in your life, but just don't hug people at work. You're
Yep.
you're just asking for trouble. And that's the reality. That's how that works.
and they'll still do it.
Yeah. I've seen your face. Like, it's amazing because like your face barely changes, but there's like this subtle thing where like it's that. Well, you made the joke where like you're just in your head, you're thinking about all the paperwork. You're like, okay, I need, this is going to be a 29J. This is an email to this person. You know,
Yeah.
this isn't really related to anything.
Yeah, speaking of the HR thing, I remember there's this clip. I've tried to find it, but nobody's clipped it out because the show didn't even run that long. But it was called Better Off Ted. And there's a scene. It's this place where it's like this corporate work environment. where they
Yeah, I know
actually
the clip you're
experiment.
talking about.
Yeah, and there's the HR person is sitting there. And
Portia
some
de
guy-
Rossi, right?
Is that
think-
who it was?
it's
Well,
Paige-
she's
I
the
think it's Pa-
boss.
Oh, she's the boss.
Yeah. The HR person's sitting in there and they're in there talking to her. And then in the middle of that, some guy falls past the window from like a top story floor. Like, so the guy's probably going to die or something. She doesn't even flinch. She just goes, that's going to be some paperwork. And it just keeps going. I'm like, yeah, I get that. That part cracked
No,
me up.
I saw that face in you like the first time I ever saw you in the professional world, when I was just standing there talking to you during a break, and somebody walked up and said, "So and so just tried to stab me in the eye with a plastic fork," and like your expression didn't even change. You just walked off to the office.
There's a lot of people who get to know me at work and they think it's actually was true on my mission too. Because like in Spanish, there was all these Mexicans who thought that I was like some sort of doctor or lawyer type, and then they didn't find out that when I'd be in English back at the house, that I'd be a goof off or whatever. And it's kind of the same in the HR world. Like I go into the HR scene and I just suddenly freeze up, not freeze up. I mean, I know so much to the point I almost kind of can't talk to people because I'm so aware of, I can't even ask you if you have a family and kids and stuff like that, being an HR guy, just
Yeah.
like normal chit chat, because something could turn into something.
Like, I remember you telling me once, like, you can't laugh at jokes.
Yeah, I don't. If
Like,
the people are telling me jokes and there's like a third party around or something that could hear me laughing at the joke, so people might tell me a joke and I might have even like politely laughed or something, or even found it funny, but I won't laugh at it. I'll just stare.
yeah,
'Cause
you have to
if
be
somebody
extremely
like
careful.
if somebody heard me laughing at a dirty joke, even if they think that, like, if that's the person that they want to complain about for being some sort of sexual harasser, and they see me sitting around joking and laughing with them about stuff, and now they can't come complain to me about that person, and it all could be problems.
It's nothing but minefields. Like, there's no HR version of nerfing everything. Like, no matter what, there's always a potential.
No. But there is some level where I think HR people can also be the problem. They can go cause a problem. They can go be the ones sticking their face in the middle of stuff or asking people to come and bring a claim and trying to make stuff up. And I definitely don't do that.
Yeah.
And if the reverse happens, which that's one of the Lynn situations where it drives me so nuts, where he says that thing of like, well, we know from the statistics that on average, like, no, women lie. I know firsthand that they will lie, and their lies happen. They can get caught red-handed in lies. They also tell the truth because they're humans, just like any human is. And the whole social justice setup of believe all women is not the way that we should be, because there's pushes and all this stuff to change the corporate world into this, to change the corporate world in to listen and believe over due process and due diligence and that sort of stuff.
Oh yeah.
And
No, we saw it all where, like, I mean, I'll never forget that, like, Christine Ford cried and everybody went, well, she's obviously telling the truth.
yeah,
And then Brett Kavanaugh cried and they went, see, that proves he's a drug rapist. Kyle Rittenhouse cried, oh, that proves he's a white supremacist who went there to murder black people for fun.
which was exactly Glenn's rationale for why he sided with one side over the other, even though that
Yeah.
exact rationale will burn him plenty of times
know.
in his life.
And then I wish we could show the clip going back 25 years to the prescient Simpsons episode where Homer gets accused of sexual harassment. You remember that? And they even have the scene where, like, it's Helen Lovejoy says, well, her tears say more than evidence ever could. You know? Like,
Uh,
yeah, it was real life. It turns out that was 25 years, just a prophecy of real life.
yeah, because they're actually trying to. It's one of the reasons I speak up and stand up, and I'll go along with the law as long as it is the law. But if the law changes towards these directions, which from all sights and sounds, it looks like they can get enough pressure on those institutions. They are activistic enough that they could change laws. If the laws change that that's how I'm supposed to be or supposed to interact or supposed to take on claims. And right now, I already know if I go to my next certification as an SPHR, Senior Professional in Human Resources, that they're going to start trying to push some of this stuff, even though it's obviously
Oh.
against the Civil Rights Act.
It's
But
already
they get
happened
it.
in universities. Like, we have 10 years of that already in the universities.
It's happening. The SHRM certifications are pushing this stuff in.
Sure.
And yeah, human resources management, HRCI. I mean, I forget what the exact terms are,
How
but I
many
know
of
that.
these are there?
Well, that's all the same one.
What level are
It's all
you?
different.
Are
I'm
you
Senior Professional in Human Resources, SPHR. It's as high as you get because that's global. That's not international. And so it's
get
like
international?
it's like a CPA type thing. Yeah, you have
What
to
is
be,
because you can handle an acoso sexual
yeah.
en
Of course,
español.
yeah, but you have to know the laws of the land of that place. But
Or in Mexico, the law is just bribe the judge.
well, you have to
The
pass
law.
tests. So to be an SPHR, first
Well,
you
in
have to
Mexico, you
be
pass the test with a bribe. That's how you
to be
pass
an
the test.
SPHR, you have to be in human resources management for like 7 years to even take the test. And then you go take the test, and they purposely make the test hard because they want it to be prestigious.
But once you
And
pass it, you get to tattoo it on the inside of your hand, and
yeah, I mean, I can write Chris Hanna SPHR just like people can write
you
CP.
can put it up. Too bad that you don't have checks anymore. You can order your
Yeah.
checks with SPHR on it.
Yeah, but even doing stuff like this podcast or whatever, I mean, especially the way that stuff's pushing, the way they're activistically moving into law. One of the reasons to speak up now is because everything I'm certified in is on the chopping block. And I mean that dead seriously, every ounce of it. And if it moves over to that stuff, the answer for me is I quit. I'm not going to do this stuff. Just the same exact way where it like came down to like vaccine mandates and all that sort of stuff. I knew it wasn't going to pass if the law stayed how the law was that we always knew it. But if somehow the activistic judges found a reason to move it around and do something that obviously wasn't how things were founded, I would have gotten to the point where, okay, you guys passed that law. Now I disagree with the law. No, I'm not doing this. So I'm done. I'm out. All these details. I mean, the only reason I'm in the HR world is because I got chased out of the
Academia.
academic world. They're chasing out of everything. They're chasing out of it. The real truth of this thing, I think he keeps talking about it here, is they activistically, like PZ Myers and Mement or
Oh
Hemant,
boy, yeah,
those guys
that's an old name from
activistically-
the new atheist scene.
So they activistically started chasing out the four horsemen, the money makers. They started putting in these extremely insane policies, these HR style policies at
Yeah.
these conventions, and people were just like, I don't not even want to come mess with this. These things are so ridiculous. And that's where the Atheism Plus movement came out of that. And it became more puritanical than Puritanism.
Yeah. But see, that's an interesting thing though, like PZ Myers, where like he's one of those guys where he was one of the early guys to glom onto this woke crap. John Delin's still going. We'll see how much longer he goes. But PZ Myers thought that by glomming onto it, that his being a white, old, tenured, straight male
It
professor
would save him, that it would keep
would save him. And it's like,
like
no,
Lynn thinks, like the Lynn thinks.
his shit's like nobody cares about PZ Myers anymore.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's like, I mean, it's a matter of time. Like there's like this trajectory only goes one way. Like as long as
Yeah,
we
the
keep
snake-
tilting in that direction, yeah.
The snake eats its own tail. And if you're going to play along with
It-
it, it'll eat you.
It's like years and years ago, like I'm trying to get this through. This was so many years ago, right after Richard Spencer got punched and everybody on the left cheered. And I remember, and you probably were there, getting on a fight with our mutual friend who went off the Marxist deep end. And I remember because, he's like, look, I think it's funny when a Nazi gets punched. And so I'm like, so why not just put sugar in his gas tank? Why not tell your kids they can't play with his kids? Why not tell his kids they can't go to public school? Like, and eventually that's things like eventually get to like, why not just kill him?
Yeah.
Like if,
And the
that's
answer
the
is
thing
they
is, like,
would if they could get away with it. They'd say,
exactly. And that's the thing is that like John Dehlin doesn't get it. That like, this thing only goes one way, and it, like as long as you keep tilting it in that direction, it ends with you. Nobody gets away from it.
yeah. Look, you have enough examples of it in history, but in the times of like the French Revolution or even the Russian Revolution, when they got to go around and start, or even Che Guevara, all the things that get hidden from people, that they got to start going around and axing anybody who they even thought for a second was maybe on the other side. This is all the exact same energy. It's just now they have to cancel. Now they have to terminate people from the internet world. They're social executions because nowadays social is the way that you make your money or participate in the society. It's not so much like it used to be.
And that's what this is so scary is that like James Lindsay talked about, he managed to put into a pithy sentence something that I'd always struggled with trying to understand, which is like with like the Bolsheviks. Like, how the hell was it Lenin and Stalin that ended up being in charge? And it's because like the nature of it is that like conservatism is against it. So the more radical you are, you get to just keep denouncing your opposition for not believing hard enough. And that's the thing is you can see how like it's just like any other cult. The most fervent, truest believer, the one willing to take the idea further along its logical track is the one that will go through, because otherwise you can't justify your position.
But then it always happens like Robespierre. He gets to a point where he says, well, now I've got documents on all of you and I'm going to execute all of you.
Yeah.
And then they all said, no, well, how about we execute you? And Robespierre's head's in the guillotine. Or that same exact thing happened with Stalin's, the guy who was trying to take over for Stalin afterwards. It's in the movie Death of Stalin. And he did the same thing to all those guys, like, I have papers, I have documents on all of you. And so they all said, oh, okay, well, we'll get rid of you now. That worked for that guy for a while, but then it turned on him.
Did you ever see that there's on YouTube, Christopher Hitchens does commentary as Saddam Hussein calls out all of his opposition, and they're literally dragged out of the hallway and they were taken outside and executed. And it's all on video. Have you seen that? It's
yeah, actually, I think
it's
I
been
did
it's
see
probably
that.
yeah, it's like it's really crazy because like because a lot of this stuff where it's like Lenin and Stalin, like it's in the past. There were no microphones, there was no video, but then like we're starting to see this stuff, because like this video I'm talking about with Saddam Hussein is I think 77,
Mm,
but like and you're like, holy, that is how this actually goes down. Is like you have a democracy, however weak, you bring all the leadership in, and anybody who ever said anything bad about you is drug outside and executed. And
yeah.
and like, yeah,
So
anybody, it's on YouTube.
the
It's
entire
terrifying.
movie of Death of Stalin is all that after the death of Stalin and all these leaders who don't know what to do because that was the guy who made all the shots, but they were so used to tiptoeing around him. And this other guy was Beria. His name is Beria, the guy who
Oh yeah,
really
he
held
was
all the different
Stalin's hitman.
documents. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was like, I have documents on all of you, and every single one of you, I could take you off to the thing. And then they executed him, which is that's what happened in Russian history, not as fast as it happened in that movie, but
Well, that's one of those other things I've learned about Stalin was interesting is that like being an enemy of Stalin was not as dangerous as being a friend of Stalin.
and that's what happens here. That's what I've said before. You if you go try to be an ally, like the
Yeah.
James Lindsay has that article about there you have a woke breaking point. Everybody would have a woke breaking point faster if they actually went and tried to be allies. There'll be some people who will be fine lashing themselves forever, like Lindsay Hansen Park or Mitt Romney, because I mean I've watched Lindsay Hansen Park take the lashings and be like, yes, give me more lashings. Just like you can watch John DeLynn say, yes, give me more lashings. But most people will
I wish I could
really
see
quickly go like,
Lindsay's
I'm not going to take this anymore.
I wish I could see Lindsay's face when she finds out that she's been lumped in with Mitt Romney as a category of human. Of somebody just willing to take the woke lashing as long as it lasts. I think you're onto something there. Is like there is absolutely something masochistic in it for some people. Undoubtedly.
They're the
You
ones
know?
who take it and keep going with it. You have to be somebody who's very, very willing in a
Well, yeah,
sadomasochistic
and
way of just
well,
taking
and
lashings and liking it. Like, thank you for lashing.
so bringing up Christopher Hitchens again and other videos that people should watch featuring Christopher Hitchens narrating Mother Teresa. And this is a thing that we've discovered since Mother
Oh,
Teresa
yeah.
died
That she
in her
believes that
journals.
every
Everything Mother Teresa about was centered around personal suffering. She
Hmm.
fetishized personal suffering. And again, I don't think she was unique in that. I think this is a genre of person. And yeah, this woke shit
I
undoubtedly
think
plays
it's a
into that.
Catholic. I think there is some Catholic type.
I think that's the thing is like every controlling type religion has a guilt cycle, and certain types of people, it's a form of scrupulosity, I guess. For certain kinds of people,
But
just really dig into that. Like I hate myself and I want to flagellate
the
myself.
funny thing about that is there's some happy medium that both sides are getting wrong. I've been having some sort of discussions with this guy who's really into Sam Harris's concepts of well-being. And you have that guy Harari, the guy who wrote *Sapiens*. James Lindsay's been going after him because he's right up there with Klaus Schwab. He hangs out with Klaus Schwab all the time, and his whole concept is humans need to just kind of be fed a drip and put on video games and put away to store and disappear, kind of like Wally. And I would say Sam Harris's great big galaxy brained ideas too. If you really go all the way with him, it does kind of seem like they're hinting at do the Wally thing of just make people so they can just sit and imbibe and take and so there is some sort of level that now we're anti-fragile than the Nassim Taleb thing. Like some of what causes our growth or causes us to be healthy or causes us to create is some level of suffering or like like weightlifting. Like you got to put your body against stuff or your bones get brittle if they're in outer space or something like that. But Mother Teresa goes clear off the other deep end of it, and she thinks like all holiness is found in suffering. But then the well-being people go, well, no, nobody should suffer even the pain of being slightly uncomfortable for 2 minutes.
Yeah, and I was gonna bring this up earlier, talking about people where it's like, as again, used to be an idea of classical liberalism. Like it's built into the idea of free speech that you will hear things you don't like. And like part of the value system of classical liberalism is tolerance.
Yeah.
which is that you don't have to like things, you have to tolerate them. And you have to learn to do that. And it's a form of, and it takes a maturity. And that's the thing, is like talking now, and I'm gonna sound like an old guy, but it's like it used to be that people valued, like, because I imagine like John Wayne, like the idea of that, like any John Wayne character, that like if somebody walked up to John Wayne and said like, you have toxic masculinity, that John Wayne, like, how does John Wayne react to that? Like a man,
Toxic as they come, darling. Or something.
whatever you say, Pilgrim.
Yeah.
Like, whereas like, because that's things like just imagine like if they redo woke John Wayne. Like, let's do woke John Wayne characters from movies. What would the woke man who shot Liberty Valance? Like, that would be a fun thing. Let's take let's take the greatest Western ever film and let's turn it on its head and make it into the woke version. How does that all work out? First off, Jimmy Stewart is a black. Jimmy Stewart is Rashida Tlaib in this story. We'll have to start there. What do we do with Lee Marvin? Lee Marvin stays Lee Marvin because he's a rich white man.
Is he playing like there's some sort of sense of him that it seems like he might be hinted at being like a Mexican or something like that.
I wonder. This did come from a time when people thought Mexicans might be gangsters. It was in a distant past when people erroneously associated Mexicans with.
It was also the
organized
kind of
crime.
time where a white person might be playing a Mexican because they just put like a
Yeah,
little
exactly.
makeup on them.
Well, John Wayne played Genghis Khan.
Yeah.
That's
Have you ever watched that?
I'm not the whole thing. Let's see, where is it?
It doesn't say
Lee
anything.
Marvin is
Liberty
no, I don't
Balance.
say. Yeah,
Doesn't
I think he's just a bad guy.
I thought the movie was kind of hinting that he was a Mexican, but
Maybe he's just Mexican adjacent.
yeah. He's dark skinned, whatever the Hollywood trope is. Well, at least it's probably just dirty though. But this
Yeah, I think he's just a guy. Valance terrorizes the area in the town's cowardly Marshall Appleyard. Is that Andy Devine? I think that's Andy. That's a podcast where we just talk about good movies. Now I just want to watch it. Lab Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. Instead, I'm gonna watch Cara Santa Maria.
Liberty Valance, he can't be the John Wayne. He can't save the girl in any way, shape, or form. And they'd probably leave it in there that Jimmy Stewart didn't actually do it.
Spoilers.
But it was
Jimmy
actually
Stewart
the
is not the
woman.
man who shot Liberty Valance.
It was actually the woman who did it.
It would have to be the woman, and she has to be single mom with
And
kids.
she did it herself. And not only was him taking credit for him.
Oh yeah, so that's because that's we'll
It's
change
a
the whole
man
ending.
it's a man taking credit for.
And so for her deep honor is that she takes on the shame of knowing that she was the
So
man,
he's actually
that she was the woman who shot. See, so we're already.
Jimmy Stewart's actually the toxic bad guy.
Yeah, man,
And-
it's hard to make good stories all horrible.
And the only thing that John Wayne does is he knows that it was actually the woman, and he goes and tells the internet. He invents the internet to tell everybody and cancels Jimmy Stewart, the congressperson, at the end.
So Liberty Valance is an unarmed black man.
Oh,
I think we're gonna make another version of this.
But that's where they mix themselves up, because they always get caught in conundrums. Like I said, there was that.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's why I'm saying it's hard, because it's like it's hard to warp reality to fit their ridiculous faith-based worldview that doesn't make any sense.
As I said, that movie, there's the new Netflix movie, and they do this all the time. If you watch any one of those movies or shows, when they get kind of mixed up in their morals. But there's this movie called I Care a Lot, and it's about this woman who just exploits old people for their money and puts them in old folks' homes and steals all their money. But they can't have the woman who's doing that not be a great lesbian leader who's like a girl boss. He's like, I'm a girl boss, even though my job is to exploit the crap out of women. And if you watch the show, I'm telling you, really, if you watch it, you can see them not know what to do to save her as a lesbian girl boss and have her be the bad guy who exploits old people. They don't know what to do with it.
Because human beings aren't themselves; they are products of the social construct that's determined.
They're so dumb. So anyway, Cara Santa Maria, the reason we went through all that sort of stuff is she was the first person to come in and clean up after Rebecca Watson, the Elevatorgate person, who, uh, after all that, like we said, the whole entire atheism scene kind of blew up. A lot of people like Rebecca Watson, PZ Myers, Hemmant, who John Lynn praises, they all got onto the bandwagon of there's just something that's bad about Harris and Dawkins and Hitchens, and they're toxic. They're toxic. It destroyed the scene because those guys were the money makers. But Cara Santa Maria replaced Rebecca Watson. She left Skeptics Guide seemingly cordially, but I think they all got to the point where they're saying, "Hey, you're kind of turning this into."
I think it was a mutual decision, but it was a mutual decision a long time coming. It's the feeling I get as
Yeah.
somebody who's listened to that during that whole time. Because you could
So-
kind of feel it. Because that's something like I really, really respect how Steve Novella manages that show. Or at least I did up until I mean, like I said, I haven't listened in years, so I don't know what it's like.
They stayed,
But I always thought he did a
pretty
really good
scientific.
job about being,
Sticking
like
to scientific subjects and what the subject at
Yeah.
hand is,
and like and they never pretended that they didn't have politics or political bias, but they were very good at tempering that.
well, they're
much as
taking on
we-
with science, and there's plenty of stuff. Just like we said all the time, that I come at John Link so frequently say they do it again on this episode. They say, "Oh, when you leave religion, that doesn't mean you're just a perfectly rational thinker. Like you might leave religion and join QAnon," which I think is such a dishonest thing, because there's a million and one examples of how lefties think ridiculous things, and
Also,
Steve
I'm
Novella-
gonna bet that most people who believe QAnon are Christian and therefore are believers, so they haven't left religion. So
But that's the point.
everything
Is
about the premise is broken.
Larson and DeLynn will never give us like an example of the left wing getting into nutty thoughts. And that's why I say with Skeptics Guide for the Universe, they covered all sorts of stuff where the left wing really got into different types of things like crystals or
Yeah.
horoscopes, or, they attacked any one of those things. But
Well, like it used to be, that's one thing like Skeptics Guide used to talk about a lot was the anti-vaccine scene. And one thing they talked about is that the anti-vaccine scene was kind of an outlier in the whole uh, social discourse in that it wasn't predominantly a left or right thing. Like
yeah,
each side had their camps.
they went after Jim Carrey and Jenny McCarthy.
There you
that
go,
whole
yeah.
scene. JP Sears, who now does almost kind of straight right wing stuff, he wasn't really like a right wing comedian at first.
He seems like a guy to me that got pushed to the right. That
But
they
he for sure did. But his comedy initially started off of kind of like he might have gotten all of his topics from Skeptics Guide, because all of his initial stuff was making fun of spiritual life. And
The
most
first thing
of
I
his
ever saw him
spiritual life
do
stuff-
was the I'm gluten free video, which
Yeah.
was brilliant.
so
He
it
hit
was
the nail on
mostly-
the head.
So it was mostly ripping on.
Just pseudoscience, yeah.
Yeah.
Boy, we are an hour and 20 minutes into this.
Yeah, let's just see if we can hit the highlights of it, because I listened to the whole thing and it made my ears bleed. But I guess we've already
Yeah.
kind of said the stuff without the clips. But so
I-
Cara Santa Maria, just like she coming in and cleaning up for Cara here, she came in to clean up for Rebecca Watson, and I think she might be one of the reasons, along with other ones, why it just got infuriating or frustrating to listen to, because I think they did little by little. If you listen to this whole episode and you listen to how she wedges in her politics into it, I think I did
Yeah.
start noticing that at that time enough to be like, okay, you guys are irritating me.
How many times they say the word gross?
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, they talk about that's gross. Where it's like, okay, you're tipping your hat that this is no longer like a rational discourse for you. You're talking about it, people's beliefs is gross, or their politics is gross. All right, you sound like a Nazi.
Yeah.
That's what that is. Where it's because, like, for example, like, I don't think that you should cut the tips of little boys' wieners off when they're 8 days old. I don't think that. But you're not going to hear me say Jews are gross. I don't think we should do that. But there's that line you don't cross where it's like, this is an intellectual, even if there's a moral component to this. In my classical liberal view, this is a disagreement that we can have without me dehumanizing or literally villainizing anybody, which there's an awful lot of villainizing going on here.
Yeah. Well, okay.
Let's
So
start.
here's one.
Sure, in a different animal now, but back when I used to go,
You're a big deal. So
yeah, I mean,
Me.
here's the thing. I've worked in television since I've been an adult. I would say I was an academic first. So I did my undergrad in psych. I did my master's in neurobiology. So in 2007, after I finished my master's, I was like, what am I going to do? I think I'll start a PhD. I moved to New York.
I found Rogan's name, but it didn't have it. There's a moment that she says she doesn't want to invoke Rogan's name.
Yeah, there's a lot of that where she's shitting on people in that kind of way. That is creepy to me. It's bigoted. It's bigotry in the classical sense and not in the new woke sense.
When she talks about Dawkins and Hitchens being as I do agree to a certain extent that they had bad qualities and that we need more representation like Sam Harris. Like, Sam Harris has gotten just as canceled as they have. Like Sam Harris had on Charles Murray, and then these guys went bucka wild, and he's also spoken out against the wokeness of the race stuff. That's why I always want people like John to actually call themselves atheists, because we have a stigma. We are pompous, arrogant a-holes like the later years of Matt Dillahunty, Aaron Raw, and Hitch. She's even calling Dillahunty and Aaron Raw the a-holes, which those guys went full woke. Those guys went on full PZ Myers side.
I feel like Aaron Raw has backed off, but I don't know. Like, at least it's not dripping into his content like it used to. Not that I follow him super closely, but there was a period where I was like, he was dropping a lot of it. And I mean, just observationally, he's not dropping it into his stuff. He's just doing his science, his autistic science thing again, which good props. Like, even if he believes
Matt
as long as he
Dillahunty
keeps it out of his activism, that's fine.
Matt Dillahunty is straight up woke.
Yeah. I
We've
mean,
gone into that, but
yeah. And I have, I used to, there was a time that I binged watched old Atheist Experience episodes.
the boss.
And they're like, yeah, again, like for an Atheism 101 thing, you should listen to a couple 100 hours of Atheist Experience. And then you will have heard literally all there is to hear in that sphere. And that's good, because that's why I don't listen to that stuff anymore. It's because there are no new arguments, and there's not gonna be. But there's always new wokeness.
I just needed to go a second earlier. Here it was.
Don't worry about that. I was just letting you know that's what we do. So
it was the same, and I hate to even evoke his name because it's a different picture and a different animal now. But back when I used to go on Rogan's podcast,
She can't talk about the wrong thinker.
And it's just so funny because she just drops that as in and we all know why. Oh, really? Why exactly?
I hate to even evoke the name. I got to
show us.
I got to sing it.
Because I mean, you're not a journalist, you're just a communicator, but I'm sure you use journalistic principles. So I'm sure that you can explain to us using a reference, a quote, a clip about why we don't invoke Joe Rogan's name. It's just so stupid.
So
Like, I
all
mean, I
that
used to,
time,
like,
I figured she
it's-
had more of a degree and all that stuff when she got asked on the Skeptics guide, but I think she just got on for her podcasting prowess off of Nerdist and all that stuff. So she's getting a
Yeah.
PhD now. Let's listen to what it's about.
but it's going to be a massive change.
yeah.
And then if anyone's interested, my dissertation that I'm actively working on is qualitative. So that's a big change for me because I came from neuroscience. So I didn't even know qualitative research existed. But I'm doing a qualitative phenomenological investigation of the experience of people who are choosing to die using medical aid in dying.
Let's translate that. A qualitative study of of people who are choosing to die. Phenomenological. That it's interviews. You're interviewing people who are choosing to die. Maybe that's going to be your dissertation. You're going to call yourself science PhD afterwards for that.
See, because that thing is I think there's undoubtedly value in this type of thing. Like, if somebody catalogs this stuff, even applying some kind of framework to all this stuff, there's certainly value in that. But just the way that they dress it up in that ridiculous language. And again, no, you're not doing science.
That's
Can't
journalistic. It's journalistic. It's
Yeah.
But there's a sense of it too, because Delenn talks about too. People criticize him of this, but there's a level of, if I needed to make sure I got PhD behind my name, because I kind of built the whole entire brand about me being kind of this thing, the same way Bill Nye the Science Guy did, never had PhD behind his name. There'd be a route that you'd go if you just want to get it knocked out.
Yeah. Because
Sorry to
you don't
cut
have to
you.
know any complicated math.
Phenomenological,
have to-
qualitative. I didn't
Yeah.
even know qualitative was a thing. It isn't nowadays. And this one of the things that
Qualitative.
they bring up, because I saw this other guy criticizing these other academic books that are so full of moralistic language. And of course,
I want to make this face that she's making when I hear qualitative. How do I do that face?
you got it.
Do it.
And Larson was all outraged on that fallacy video saying, "Oh, he made these moralistic claims." Like, there is so much moralistic crap in qualitative studies, phenomenological studies. The entirety of critical race theory or all those different things are going to call themselves qualitative, even though there probably is a way to do more rigorous qualitative research. She might get involved in that. But most of the time, it's this crap sophistry gets away with its crap sophistry by announcing that it's qualitative.
Yeah. Like, we know that person that got a PhD from BYU, and it was just her Facebook profile was like her dissertation or whatever. Like, she just said, "Oh, this," because that was her thing. It's like, "Oh, I'm a black female Mormon getting a PhD, and that's my PhD. I got a
So
PhD in." It's like it's the most recursively weird thing where, like,
Ri
literally she got a PhD for going to school for getting a PhD.
so right now, on the most recent podcast with Sandra Tanner, Lynn's on there and Gerardo are on there with their shirt that says Black Menaces. The Black
I
Menaces
didn't
are
see that.
they're a group of people at BYU who go and they're black students who go around to BYU and interview other students and put them on the spot saying, "Do white people have privilege?" And you can follow them on TikTok, and all I do is come up to people, stick a microphone in their face, say, "Do white people have privilege?" And the way
Jesus
that they
Christ.
don't interact back, they just ask the question and move on. It's like a clear signal to me that, like, this is ethnography. They're doing, because they'd argue back if it was just people being like chit chatting on the street. But the fact that they're just going and asking questions and then moving on, I promise they're going to go write it all down, then write a paper about it, and that paper is going to be some sort of credit towards something qualitative.
And then it'll be
study.
cited as proof that white supremacy is real and impacts people every day.
Yeah, or this is how this thing made me feel. Give me my master's. And that's literally what the stuff is.
Scary. Alrighty.
Just to make you pukey for 1 second, I'm going to show you that. So here it is.
April 14th, 2022. And I'm wearing my Be a Menace shirt in support of Black Menaces, the amazing TikTok and Instagram channel.
It's not amazing. It's stupid. But
Do you have white privilege, Jonathan Lynn?
I guarantee that they're going to get qualitative research credit for it. I promise they are. At BYU, of all places, they're going to get that.
How long? See, like, this is what's so terrifying to me is I just saw this news about the debt forgiveness. And I noticed, like, and I can tell it's going to be something incredibly stupid because it's not in any of the headlines or even in the blurbs. Who's paying for it? Is the Fed just going to print money to forgive all the student debt? Because, like, that's things like I've said for a long, long time. Like, oh, I agree that the people that have this debt shouldn't have to pay it necessarily. But I think that the people who should have to pay are the universities, because the universities committed the fraud. They committed the fraud. They were at the heart of it. They managed it. They were the ones telling all the lies. So, like, yeah, I agree that if you've spent $120,000 on your worthless degree, you shouldn't have to pay for that. The people who defrauded you should. And that's the American university system. But obviously, it's not going to be the American university system. They're going to walk away from this. They get to run with the money. And it's going to be the Fed prints money and says, sorry, your degree costs too much for not teaching you nothing. That's on civilization.
It should be the dumb universities that relieve them of the debt of the thing.
That's what I'm saying. Exactly.
Mm.
They should, like, seriously, shut them down. They committed fraud.
Yeah.
On a gigantic scale. But the thing is, the reason that this will never happen is that there are too many true believers where they're like, oh no, we didn't lie when we told kids that training them to be neo-Marxist activists in the guise of a gender studies degree. Like,
But this isn't even like full bore of that stuff, because that stuff gets even worse. But this whole episode to me is like the representation of people who've sniffed their own farts of being sure that the academic system that they didn't even really fully engage with because they kind of just got it to check boxes is
yeah.
is their new pseudo religion. They got their PhDs the same way some kids get through their baptismal questions, just to get their baptism.
Yeah.
And they have this belief in it that we're just right because we're right, and it's just so right. And wow, we
Yeah.
just landed on rightness.
I remember it was like, because the last time was like 5 years ago. Because like in a period of 15 years ago to 5 years ago, because they stood out to me where there was 4 different times that people with PhDs told me either in these exact words or words close enough that it doesn't matter. They told me, quote, "You are not Latino because you have never experienced racism."
Yeah.
And like it took like because at the time I'm like, what the
Well,
like
it's a
how can anybody get out of high school, let alone a PhD, and have such an erroneous view of
well,
everything?
I'll tell you,
And
it
it took
comes
me forever to
from
figure it out. It's like, oh, you learned that at school. They
yeah,
taught you that
it comes
Latinos are
from
people who have experienced racial prejudice. Like,
it comes from a constructivist worldview, which I think only hand bananas agree with. Which that's a throwback to the Aqua Teen Hunger Force.
Aqua Teen,
Well, let's listen to a
and I
little bit about that.
you.
Because that's horrible. And people are dying, and I work with people from all walks of life. I fully respect them, and I have a constructivist
Respect.
view when I work.
Some of them believe
therapy.
things that are gross, but I respect their grossness.
It's how I have a constructivist view when I work in psychotherapy.
Sorry, I stepped on that. I have a constructivist view. Wait, see, I didn't even notice that. I have a
People are
construct.
dying, and the people that I work with come from all walks of life and all religions, and I fully respect them, and I have a constructivist view when I work in psychotherapy, which is that
See, that makes a lot of sense. Like I realize now that my sisters have a constructivist view of me, which is why they think that I'm a Nazi who hates women.
Yeah, the constructivist view is why you're not a Latino.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's exactly. A constructivist view is why men can't be the victims of abuse by women. That's constructivism. Yeah. No, yeah, it's funny. Like it's funny how these little phrases slip by you for so long.
Yeah, and
I
then
never really put that
if
together
you
until you
get
just pointed out,
woke,
like, she's telling about,
woke
like,
to
she's
the
like, "Oh, yeah,
phrases.
I understand that the people I work with who are, let's not forget, like, we're talking about people who are dying, that are very close to death to the point where they're talking to her about it, and she's kinda doing this underhanded thing where it's like, 'Oh, I respect you, but I respect you in that I understand that, you're terrible because society made you that way.'" Oh, god, that's really gross. That's gross. I'm gonna say that that's gross.
Yeah, I think it set my ears on fire. Now this is a portion.
Like, I don't think that Orthodox Jews are gross for, telling their women that they're not allowed to, go outside without their hair showing if they're married. Because 'cause I'm
Yeah,
not gonna call them gross for that. I'm gonna call Cara Santa Maria gross for having a constructivist view of dying people's feelings.
yeah. Well, this is a portion that Jonathan Streeter thought that she sounded pretty good on. Listen to this.
view of suicide as a mental health provider. And I will say, we're talking about a sensitive issue right now, so I want to give out not only a trigger warning, but also as as somebody who feels very strongly about suicide prevention. If you are struggling with that right now, there is a hotline that you can call. It's 800-273-8255. This is a real issue, and it is a disconcerting issue. And I feel strongly, I will say this right now, that individuals who are young, who are not yet neurologically developed, and who don't have the capacity to make decisions for themselves, individuals who are struggling with mental illness but have not yet received the appropriate treatment and would otherwise, with appropriate treatment, be able to live a fulfilling and beautiful and meaningful life just like I do, because I'm in
There's
active
no
treatment.
evidence for that.
That
The
in
treatments don't
cases
work.
where individuals like that die by suicide, any suicide is absolutely tragic, but of course those cases are highly preventable. There are sadly situations in which suicide is very likely not preventable. There are people for whom mental illness is a terminal disease, similar to certain physical illnesses. There are people who have intractable and treatment resistant mental illnesses who are of sound mind and who have capacity, who ultimately make that decision for themselves. I'm not saying that I think it's the right decision. I'm not saying I think it's a good decision, but I do honor and respect that it was their decision. And I do think that part of the conversation is not often had enough, that consenting adults who have done everything and tried everything and still ultimately came to a decision for themselves, that there should be more of a conversation about respecting those decisions. And this obviously comes on the tails of me being somebody who advocates for medical aid in dying. So in certain states, 11 or is it 18? Ooh, gosh, I need to look back at my lit review on my dissertation. I think it's 10 states and 1 jurisdiction, so 11, because DC also has legalized it. In America, individuals can choose medical aid in dying if they are certified. The certifications are pretty similar to hospice.
So she's talking about medical aid in dying, but I think if you take that to its full extent, Jonathan Streeter was pointing to that same concept should hold over for trans issues, that if you're a young child, you should not be able to make those decisions yourself. If you
Yeah.
take that concept all the way through, but I wonder if you pressed her on it, if she would hold to that concept all the way through. She
Yeah, no, because that's
obviously-
exactly what popped into my mind when she started talking about that. Where it's like, well, wait a second, like, what's
So,
the
but
big
I
issue of
wonder-
the day?
I wonder if she'd hedge on it if we.
I think she would, because woke is a religion,
and being consistent is not part of.
yeah.
Here's this scene.
Maybe it's gotten us to where we are now, but certainly there are better ways. And so what you see is Dawkins,
What are the better ways?
Harris, and others starting to really go at religion and say, hey, we can do better. And
They didn't
I
say
would've
that.
thought-
You're the guy who says do better.
Yeah,
They
they
just said
said
religion.
knock
They
it
just said
off.
religion is wrong for these reasons.
Yeah, they just said knock that off, and that's all.
Yeah.
They said.
You're the one who thinks that you can replace it with a better idea.
It was the plus in atheism plus when they thought they were supposed to start giving
Exactly.
moral lessons themselves.
No, it's enough to say that there is no God, so there is no God to tell you to cut the tips of little boys' wieners off when they're 8 years old. So
Mhm.
that's enough. That's enough to say, like, yeah. But I live in a pluralistic society and I believe in liberal democracy, so I can cope.
my faith crisis happened right around 9/11 as well. And I've been doing this podcasting stuff for almost 20 years now. I would have thought in 2022, we would be in a very different place in terms of humanity. Now, I'm contradicting myself, because if you look at the Pew Foundation reports, we all know that the religion is on the decline in the Western world.
Yeah,
And
right.
they
The nuns are the
20%.
fastest growing group. Yeah,
the
yeah,
rest
yeah.
of the nuns. Now, having said that, I still would have thought that religion would, that your dad, that my parents, that my sister, that so many people in Utah would have like really figured out, in this case, that Mormonism is not anywhere close to what it claims to be, and certainly not reasonable, and certainly in many ways not ethical, and they would jettison it. But you've got a very resilient institution that is religion, that is still has such a grip on the United States in particular, but on humanity in general. And then very specifically in the United States, you almost have this retrenchment of religious power and of influence that
Okay, religion isn't on the decline. Church is on the decline. Religion is in an ascendancy. Particularly critical theory woke religion is ascendant right now. I don't know, hopefully it doesn't stay that way. But like, this is one of those things that like all these woke lefties constantly do, is that they confine religion to the classical churches. Where it's like, no, yeah, less people are going to church, but
We're just,
Well, it's
if
less
not
religious.
more religious, we're
Yeah.
more religious.
yeah, we're more religious. We just don't go to church for our religion. We go to Mormon Stories.
that so influences political discourse and social progress, etc. So you spend a lot of time dissecting bad thought, your pseudoscience, etc.
Mhm.
What is your analysis of
Except your own.
why in 2022, Hitchens and Harris and Dawkins and others, why we haven't made more progress in helping people let go of unhealthy, unfounded, dogmatic religious beliefs and start moving more?
I don't know.
towards scientific
Chris and I have been
method?
trying to get you to let go of your dogmatic beliefs, John, and you just won't listen.
We get
I don't know
stonewalled.
why we can't make progress on convincing you to abandon your faith.
Mindsets. Why is religion still having such a grip on humanity?
I love that you asked in that context. You're like, why hasn't Hitchens and Dawkins? And because they're assholes. Bro, like, I'm going to be honest. Like, they're
Jesus
assholes.
Christ.
These guys are important. And, I'm a big fan of Hitch, and I knew Hitch, and like, respecting the dead here. But like, he was not nice, and neither was Dawkins. I've completely written off because he's a morally bankrupt human being. I used to actually
Morally
really respect
bankrupt.
him before I understood who he really is as a person.
What is she
and
talking
Hay-
about? What is she? I mean, we brought this up earlier, but is it literally just Elevatorgate?
It's no, there's
What else- what is
Elevatorgate,
he-
and there's like 5 times across 10 years where he ran afoul of the social justice
woke-
left because
like-
he said something. Like one of the most recent ones is they're trying to push this Maori way of knowing into sea travel, and Dawkins has been critical and kind of sneering at it, that it's kind of ridiculous that we already have,
It's insane and it will kill people.
yeah.
'Cause like, look,
Um,
it's really neat. Like what Polynesian cultures accomplished in their sea
I think
navigation in the
it's
tens of
worth
thousands of years
knowing-
ago.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it's
worth knowing how
incredible.
crap they did that, but it doesn't
But,
mean
like-
it's the best science nowadays. Or,
Yeah, like, can you imagine now a
You have
500,000 ton
yeah.
shipping vessel leaves Tokyo and they're like, okay, we're going to use Maori navigation.
I looked into it, and so we have satellites and pinpointing on the Earth and all that sorts of stuff, and knowing where the other ships are and all that stuff. The Maori thing, it has a way of judging the stars and distances by holding your arms out to a certain distance like this. And they did amazing things with that. So it's awesome to know that that's how they did that and that's how they figured it out. But that's not going to be a GPS satellite today, and we're not going to learn something from it.
Modern navigation is still better.
Modern navigation doesn't have something to learn from it. We have something to learn from it historically, anthropologically, and something to respect about it. But Dawkins will sneer at that, and people just will lose their minds about it. There's been, I guess it's right about 5. There's been right about 5 of those. Oh, and he stood up for J.K. Rowling. So yeah, it's been right about 5 things, and because of those 5 things, she's showing her proper worldview that Dawkins is just unforgivable. But if she was really proper, she would have figured out that Sam Harris is canceled too. Oh, and Hitchens is supposedly canceled too, beyond just being assholes. Hitchens said women can't be funny, and Sam Harris had Charles Murray on his podcast.
Harris is a different animal altogether. He often gets lumped in with them, sadly. But I do disagree with some of his kind of political stances, but fine, whatever. That's more of an intellectual debate than a moral one.
Shut up. You turn everything moral. Come on.
And I know that's a simple answer, and that doesn't really answer your question, but the truth is it takes all types. So although I'm glad that people...
And that's it. It's like when Karen, when she talks about politics, it might as well just be religion.
Yeah. I'm trying to look up QAnon, but I don't know how they spelled QAnon when it got transcribed.
Like, I think we already talked about it, that whole thing where they did a...
It's the same. They did the same thing.
More Democrats have heard of QAnon than Republicans.
Oh yeah, by far. And only barely more Republicans that have heard on it believe in it and like it, you know. But they pulled the same 1-2, and it's the very first 1-2 that we very first talked about on the first podcast with Larson and Lynn, that they keep saying, hey,
the majority of Republicans who have heard of it disapprove of it.
Yeah, well, they keep doing the thing of saying, hey, just because you left religion doesn't mean you're rational now. Look, you might fall into something like QAnon. And it's such a dodge to just suddenly talk about some phenomenon that's not religion, even though 99% of the people believing in QAnon are also religious. But it's a way to dodge. They always get to that point where the next moment is, the answer is, and everybody knows the answer is, like wokeness. Like your ridiculous wokeness. And they always dive right from the ridiculous wokeness into QAnon stuff. I think she listened to the whole entire thing. I went nuts with it. Like I said, we got to cover all this. We could comment on the whole entire thing, but it'll take too stinking long. But I think we covered some of the more main points. But I think she's slightly better than Rebecca Watson. She's slightly better than Cara. She does bring in some sort of science or some sort of like different views about consent or thinking about forcing things upon people, although she's right in line with all vaccine policy stuff. She's right down the tubes of all those types of things. But she at least has a couple different opinions. And then here and there, even though she'll announce that her dad's just wrong and everything, she'll make it clear that she tries to talk to him at least, or thinks that she can talk to him. But it's barely better. It's like you bring in this replacement.
Moderately.
And
can you do that searchitizer for the word gross?
Oh yeah, you want to do that for many times that come up 9 times. Let's listen to them.
There's something really gross about the rhetoric of how...
She uses the word disgusting a lot too. Kevin and I were talking about that. That's one of the Jonathan Haidt's thing, is like how much people will associate disgust with something. It's kind of a big field of discovery of how people think and form their ideas. There's something really gross. What was she talking?
Like this new lady who I don't even know, simply because she married my dad, and of course it's a very patriarchal religion, simply because she married my dad, they became sort of my real eternal family. And my mother, who raised me, who I'm the closest to,
She's talking about the grossness of temple marriage stuff.
That disgust reaction.
You're moving against...
I think this is critical.
Let's listen to a couple of them.
Wasn't that hard for me to reconcile, and really, because I was like, that's gross, don't like it, not sure this is for me. I think that was sort of my process, not like I really got to figure out how to believe anyway. People often ask me what...
It's gross.
The next one.
Kind of narrative was gross. It may have been a little bit grosser than you even knew.
Yes, please inform me.
So gross. It's grosser than you imagine. Those Mormons are so gross.
I didn't buy any of it anyway. So I definitely did that. And I remember being grossed out by the meetings with the bishop and him being
I bet you the word gross ends up in her thesis, in her
I bet
dissertation.
you. Do you remember? You remember your Mormon grandma? Just how gross she was
Yeah.
heavy.
because of all her gross Mormon ideas. She was gross. Like it's just
Gross.
that thing's
And
like,
just
I think you're gross, Cara. I think you're gross because you think people are gross for their religious ideas. Like it's just you're betraying that you're having like a visceral reaction to this. And this is textbook bigotry. It's enough to say you don't agree with it or that you think that that you might consider a different path. But
Yeah.
like
It's the same thing that we say back to the Larson thing is he says, you guys will be thrown out of academia for putting all these moralistic thought. No, it's all over academia nowadays. It's overloaded with it.
Same belief as you. They look
Yeah.
happy, but it's not joy. See,
That's so gross.
oh, it's gross.
Last one. And she said other words that were like
to finish
growth.
what I started.
Like
this
seriously,
was-
if I had $1 million and I could do Patreon, sneaky Patreon things, and I'd say, okay, Cara, for $1,000, I will pay you to spend 10 minutes telling me all of the Muslim beliefs that you think are gross. Just tell me what you think that Muslims believe that's gross, like throwing gay people off of rooftops. Is that
Well, that's like the thing that I even got Larson on the hook with. They're talking to me, say, tell me the ways that the left gets irrational. You say it. You say it. No, I'm doing over beers or something, man. Blah, blah, blah.
feels
stay away from my family?
just such a gross thing, but it's very common, I think, in
I think she used other words
Oh my
besides
God,
gross.
gross.
That's just the word gross. There was I think she used disgust in there at some point, but
Dude, yeah. No, it's obvious that they have that. Yeah. It's just like when I think back
social
to my Mormon
control is
family
disgusting
saying
and
stuff that was bigoted, it's the exact same thing.
there you go. There's the last clip.
structured
Last
social
grip.
control is disgusting and horrible. And with
Everything's got moralistic language to it nowadays. And the more academic you find a person nowadays, and things that are humanity styles, and I know that she's claiming to be doing scientific stuff. No, it's humanity stuff. She's communications. She's a journalist.
Yeah.
She's a podcast.
I think I'm old enough to remember that high-minded philosophy was associated with people who refused to take a moral stand on anything.
Yeah, it's
You know,
supposed to be
like out of their
disinterested.
academic purity. We're like, yeah, exactly. They're totally disinterested and dispassionate. We're like, again,
But
like,
that's
the
gross.
word academic means for the sake of knowledge.
They'll
But
tell you that's gross and that's disgusting.
academics are what we've learned, that the whole concept of Western academia is heteronormative, phallocentric. What is it?
Yeah.
Phallogocentric,
Phallogocentric.
heteronormative, colonialist, European, cis
Gross.
normative.
It's gross.
God damn
It's
it.
just gross.
It's gross.
It's
It's
gross.
gross. It's gross. That's
It's
what it
gross to not take a moral stance and put your moral stance all through your dissertation in
Yeah.
your book. And we just saw that guy who was complaining. I think RFM had them on yesterday. The academic counter to Rodney Meldrum. I talked about some of his stuff, but he brings up all the same things too, where every single thing he talks about the Mormons and the stuff he researched on the Mormons is racist or incorrect or post-colonialism or something. But then if he talks about the Native Americans at all, he gets purely into the noble
Yeah.
savage stuff. Noble savage, noble savage, noble savage.
What was it? Thomas Sowell has a quote on this.
The morality, the moral games, the religion. This is what we've been trying to yell at Larson and DeLynn and all these guys, that the religion not only took over the atheistic movement, it had already taken over much of academia, and it's pushing into all of academia. And this is how it's pushed into your podcast, and it's pushed into everything. There's just, it's church. It's more church.
Here it is. Thomas
We
Sowell quote.
never got away from it. We're not nuns. We didn't NONEs. We aren't nuns. We're more religious than ever.
Yeah. Here it is, the Thomas Sowell. What multiculturalism boils down to is that you can praise any culture in the world except Western culture. And you cannot blame any culture in the world except Western culture.
Yep.
And he's exactly right about that. And that's things like they hate when you put those things in those simple, pithy things. Like when James Lindsay says that, what is critical race theory? call everything you want to control racist until you control it. That's exactly how that works. And that's how multicultural, like what Tom Sowell just says about multiculturalism in academia, that's how the word works. Literally.
Yeah.
Praise anything not Western, never praise Western.
Gad said would call it the 6 degrees of Noam Chomsky. He could do it in like 6 tries. He could change any problem in the world into the United States of America's imperialism's fault. And that's what academia is just loaded with that crap. It's just loaded with it.
It really is.
That's what Cara would do, you know. If you paid the $1,000 to get her to talk about the disgusting parts of any other religion, she would 6 degrees of Noam Chomsky it into our fault. Anything that is gross.
It's all gross. We are the center of the gross. It's us. The gross was coming from inside the structure.
The systems are gross, man. They're so yucky. So disgusting. My PhD, the icky, grossy yuckiness of the patriarchy. Qualitative research, the phenomenology of yucky poo-poo and how it makes things gross.
If society has dealt anybody a tough hand, it was Cara Santa Maria. She's really coming from a place of positional epistemology. What's it called? Standpoint epistemology. She's a woman. She's a Puerto Rican. She had divorced Mormon parents. She's had to fight her way through the academic system and the podcasting world. Like she talked, didn't she say she had it? Like she talked about in one point in the episode how she had a gross sexist TV producer.
Oh yeah,
you know, like yeah,
she
it's
was
like
on a show and the producer was gross and. She said some of the stuff Lindsay Hansen Park used to say to me too, that they become hyper aware that they're aging, and then that's why they're not going to get people to listen to them anymore. So they got to go get PhDs or something like that. But there's a tacit admittance in that they know that they somehow got onto those shows out of their young adorableness.
And there's also like, that never happened to any male actors. There's no male actor that started to age and no longer was getting the roles as the young guy.
But it didn't happen to any young actors who were, I'm a young 20-year-old, so they're going to put me talking on the science podcast. No, they find some science or ex-Mormon or whatever thing, and they find some adorable girl and she's got an automatic ticket in. But fine. I mean, there's even a level of me that's like, fine, talk about it. Anybody can talk about it. I can talk about it. You can talk about it. But then it becomes a platform. And it's always just a platform. And I don't think you're allowed to get into leftist world communications without becoming some sort of bullcraptivist.
Well, like, so Facebook, for example, like, because obviously the internet can figure out that I like guitars. And you know how like Facebook has started suggesting all those little like TikTok-y type things? And it just keeps showing me attractive woman inappropriately dressed, playing the guitar reasonably well. And there's a whole genre. I think there's all these women that's their career is to be attractive. Yeah. 8 out of 10 at guitar playing, 9 out of 10 on cleavage. That's a career. Meanwhile, there's a million 10 out of 10 guitar players that are just, they're
I'll watch it. Listen to
Facebook dwellers.
I've watched them and I'll tell you right now, frequently, like a lot of times they know the solo, they know it. You can see that they know it. But you can also see that they're not really pressing very hard on the strings and that stuff. And the solo that you're hearing is not what you're seeing played.
They're just playing faking it. They're not even 8 out of 10 guitar players.
Yeah, they're not playing the wrong notes, but they're not playing what you're hearing.
Yeah. I didn't even like, I was already giving them too much credit. I'm like, well, you're really good at the guitar.
Watch any given one of them. You're not hearing they're playing. You can tell that they're too soft and dainty on the bends, and you can tell that they're not,
But that's things like, so like every greasy guy that worked at every guitar store we ever went into could knock out those solos, but they can't get, 500,000 views on Facebook by showing their cleavage while doing it.
Yeah, they've got to do something better than playing the exact solo of the person. A guy can do it if he puts it in like a tutorial video and says, this is how you do it. But if it's just like, hey, look at pretty me doing this, no, ain't nobody watching.
Yeah, that's just a whole genre of just, look at pretty me doing this.
Yeah.
That's gross. That's the cis heteronormative phallogocentric world that makes women think that you can make money just by being cute.
They'll get money for doing that, but then by the time they turn Cara Santa Maria's age, it will be sexism. because now they can't get money. They can't get the free money just doing that.
They can just get a
That was-
PhD in talking about how they can't make money being cute anymore.
I used to be able to just play the same solos that a bunch of other guys could at 13, 14 too. And I got a bunch of money for doing it. But now I can't because I'm approaching 40, even though I still probably can, just not as much as I used to. But yeah, I can
Well,
still
it's like the
play
difference between like I just thought about like the difference between Joan Crawford and Joan Rivers.
Yeah.
Like Joan Rivers didn't worry so much about getting. I mean, I guess she did all the plastic surgery and stuff, but like she was always funny.
Yeah.
She was always funny, and it didn't matter what she looked like because she was always funny.
Betty
Whereas
White.
Joan Crawford
Child.
used to be very attractive, but not terribly talented. And so when she got old, she was unattractive and still not terribly talented. You
Yeah,
know?
man. I guess I give props somewhat to the women who realize that they got to maybe like double down on their credentials or whatever to stay relevant in the
Yeah.
fields that they're trying to work in, because they knew that just being the cute one on the panel wasn't gonna ride
Yeah.
forever. But
No, yeah, I guess like exact. I don't know. Like I have nothing. I can totally respect a woman who plans out their career like that. Like, oh, you stripped your way through medical school. Okay,
yeah,
good for you. That was smart. You know, if you did it, if you were safe and you took care of yourself and you saved your money, sure. Okay. Don't
worked on
pretend
your
like
skill.
the patriarchy put you down because they wanted to throw money at you for dancing around
Yeah,
naked.
it's the patriarchy gave you an extra level of free money for years and years and years and years.
Yeah.
And now you only come down to where the rest of us have always been. We have to produce to.
We actually have to produce something for money. Yeah. Alrighty. I gotta get
All
going. I
right.
gotta get back to the grocery store because I forgot to buy food for my cat. She's gonna be mad at me soon.
Yeah, we got to bounce.
Alrighty.
Gross.
We'll do a better episode next time. It's gross.
It was kind of gross. It was a gross one.
This episode was gross. We did a
Gross.
gross job. All right.
Gross.